Well, welcome back everybody. It's good to be talking with you all. So today, as you saw in the title, we're going to be looking at 10 possibly hidden and or unique features. So it could be one or the other, or it could possibly be even both. So just to kind of throw this out there, we do have numbers attached to each one of these points, but that's not their ranking. Like, I don't think that number 1 is better than number 2 and so on and so forth. That's just more for you, the viewer, to kind of keep track of whichever feature we're looking at on whatever figure it might be. So, starting things off, you can actually see here that we're looking at the Generation 2 Optimus Prime. We know it's the Generation 2 one because he has a giant electronic sound box that makes noises such as classic. The hidden or unique feature actually comes whenever we get to the back of Optimus Prime. Now, ever since I've had this as a kid, I always thought, well, I don't like the fact that his entire back is just open, you know? And it's not a big thing, but that's where this comes into play, because you can kind of see this little ledge with this little hole right here. Is you can actually take that little lip and it's meant to rest just in that hole on his back. However, the caveat is you have to use the watch batteries with the adapter that came with this electronic sound box. Now, I lost that long ago. The other thing about this sound box is that it can take, I think it's like double or triple A's, but the only problem is you can see that with that, it makes him very, very back heavy because there's no heel support. See, when it had the watch batteries, he could hold onto this no problem. So anyway, the fact that this sound box actually forms a giant backpack on Optimus Prime, I do dig it. So we transition from one Optimus to another, and before we look at this guy's unique feature, guys, first of all, I forgot to mention that you guys may know each and every one of these features today, and if you do, that's awesome. But if not, maybe you'll see something new. That was the first disclaimer. The second one is that no, the yellow that you see on this boy, that is not, this boy has never been around any form of smoke. That's actually sun damage because for many years he was sitting in the sun. Plus, this figure is 22 years old. This is an original 2001 figure. So that's the second disclaimer. Now, the hidden feature about this is this guy actually has a matrix of leadership. It's discussed in the English dub many times.
When the Autobots were sent to stop Megatron, the Matrix chose you as its inheritor, chose your being to empower with its energy, chose you to command the Autobots. As Cybertron's most powerful warrior, I should have been given that honor.
That's the heat generated by Optimus's Matrix! He's at penultimate power! You chose to play a most dangerous game, but now the game ends. You lose!
But you never actually see it except behind a glowing panel.
Huh? What's this? Where's all this extra energy coming from? What's happening here? Could we possibly be sharing the Matrix somehow?
And so on this guy, they actually sculpted in that detail, because you can see his, I guess, pseudo bandolier here that comes up to this panel. So you actually flip up that panel, and it doesn't look like any other Matrix that we have seen before. So Simon Furman put out a book a few years ago that pointed out that yes, this is this Optimus Prime's Matrix, which is weird because this is his battle armor that he doesn't wear all the time. So does that technically mean that whenever he's just the cab of the fire truck, he doesn't have the Matrix? Or am I just thinking way too far into this? Plus, the other thing that is kind of cool is in the sculpting, you can kind of see that it has this sort of battle reticule. So that is actually the number 2 feature for this Optimus Prime. Now, I do have to go ahead and put this out there that I saw a video the other day of another YouTuber. I liked his video because he looked at like almost every toy iteration of Optimus Prime, but he did kind of talk some smack on this one. And, you know, I respect a difference of opinion, but it does kind of sting nonetheless whenever he's talking smack on a boy that I think hits all the beats, if not perfectly, near perfectly. Number 3, in continuing our theme of hidden things. Okay guys, I am going to put this out here. Let's be mature about this because we're going to be talking about a very feminine feature of Blackarachnia's toy. So the reason that this gets on the list was in the show, this is how she looked. In either one of her forms, they were never shy about showing her breasts. And it was never a big deal in the show. So why this toy all of a sudden decided to magnify that particular area of this figure? Because this is show accurate, right? But the reason that they put emphasis on it was the toy came with a bra that is removable. And on top of that, you can kind of see that it just used those pegs to plug into the figure, which the areas that it plugs into are now kind of suspect, if I'm gonna be honest. And I'm like, okay, were they just afraid in the 90s that this would not be acceptable, and so this was their way to get around it? But again, it is, the reason it's on this list is it is a unique feature that was hiding something that we had already seen in the animation. So, okay, it's a weird one, and it's on this list, and really that's all I'm gonna say about it. Because outside of that, this is actually a pretty interesting toy overall. However, moving on to point number 4, as you can see on the table, we do have our boys Tigerhawk and Optimus Primal. Now, on this channel before, we have shown you the version of Cryotek and the version of Megatron that basically had the spark chamber command chairs. We mentioned that Tigerhawk has one, which is right here on his shoulder. You can see it's kind of floating freely in there. And Optimus technically fits into that category too because of the cockpit here on his chest. And Optimus himself actually has a distinction from the other 3 because you can see you can actually pop up his canopy right here. And then if you have a small enough figure to sit in that chair, you can go ahead and collapse it up, call it a day, and now Optimus has a pilot in his command chair. However, that didn't pan out for one very simple reason. Was while they had intended to have very simplified versions of the character, whichever one it was on, sitting in these command chairs, it was supposed to represent their spark. But they didn't feel that the kids that would be in these toys would understand the symbolism in it. So they removed all the pilots from at least the 3 of these. I don't know if they ever intended to do one with Optimus, but they didn't want the kids to confuse those for being the actual robots and maybe getting the wrong idea that these were like mechas. So they wanted the kids to know, no, this is Tigerhawk, this is Optimus. There is nobody piloting them. And the same thing with Megatron and Cryotek. They are the big toy is the character themselves. They are not mechas. And I like the fact that they did that. And while that is the case for the majority of these toys, there are a few examples of Cryotek in Japan going through with the idea, having a very simple, I think it was Megatron in his pre-Earth form sitting in the command chair. So there are a few of them out there, but they are rare. And moving on to number 5, we come to a figure. This thing kind of delves into old sci-fi because Beast Machine's Tankor has a feature that it was in the show, it was in the animation, and his eye would move from side to side. He was very cycloptic. You can kind of see it right there. If we get a little bit of light behind it, you can see how it lights up very nicely. However, this thing can actually replicate what you saw in the show because right here on the back, you actually go ahead and twist that from side to side, and you can actually make the eye go from one side to the other. And it's just kind of a cool niche feature. Now in the show, his robot mode head was the head that he used in his vehicle mode. However, because this is the wildly inaccurate Tankor toy, we come over here and you go ahead and fold down this panel. You can kind of see his Cyclops Eye in his tank head here. And that same lever, you just go ahead and move it from side to side. And I mean, it is really, really cool. And if you are wondering why I said it references old sci-fi, that is because in the 1970s, and again with the reboot in 2005, there was a show called Battlestar Galactica. And the old school Cylons, that is what their eye did. It moved from side to side. And the fact that in 1998, was it, where all these figures came out, the fact that they had their big tank guy doing the Cylon thing is really kind of amusing. So, see, there are Beast Machine figures that I like. I don't just take a giant dump on them every chance I get. Now, we move on to number 6, and it is dealing with Armada Cyclonus. Now, the one thing about this Cyclonus toy is that functionally, it's good. I don't have any complaints about it. The only thing that I always kind of wondered about is the fact that this dude's tail is really kind of in the way. Well, apparently, all these years of having different iterations of this mold, I never knew that you could just take the tail and pop it off. But not only that, it's not just, oh, let's get it out of the way. It can attach to one arm, but it can't attach to the other. See, it can't attach anywhere over here on what is his left arm. It is actually meant to slot right over his right arm. Now, the only problem is if the missile is loaded in the launcher, you can't do it. And so after you have the missile out of there, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a separation between the hand and the cannon where it doesn't have that over here on this one. And that's basically because this is an empty track that this little piece slides onto. Go ahead and slide it in there, and I mean, it just barely pegs in there. And now you can see he actually has a different type of cannon made out of his butt, essentially. And like I said, it just barely kind of snugly fits in that empty track that we saw. And I don't know why you would, because this is not in his instructions at all. Regardless of that, though, it is kind of an odd curiosity, which is why, again, it makes it onto this list. And number 7 has us calling all Beast Warriors to the field. Now, we are sticking within the Armada universe. We're not going to the Beast Wars universe. Although, as you can see, there is a little bit of a crossover here, because all 4 of these are Transmetal molds. Now, I don't have the Armada version of Airazor or him, but this is the Armada version of Cheetor and the Armada version of Rhinox. And all 4 of these molds were released in the Armada toy line. Now, as you might guess, Pterosaur, instead of a Predacon, was a Decepticon in that toy line. And these 3, instead of being Maximals, became Autobots. Now, there is a curiosity that both the Armada Pterosaur and Armada Cheetor do not have, that Rhinox and Airazor actually do. So we've actually discussed before that instead of the kind of mood ring reveal their actual identity, they went in and sculpted an Autobot symbol on Rhinox. Well, on the actual Armada version of Airazor, where her spark crystal was originally, they did mold in an emblem, but instead of it being an Autobot one, it was one that was a Decepticon. And again, the Armada version of Airazor was an Autobot. And so even Aaron Archer said that he didn't know how that ended up in that figure. And there's been a fan explanation because these 4 characters in the Armada verse actually got abducted by Unicron and got turned into his heralds, the 4 horsemen of his apocalypse. And so they were thinking, well, maybe it's a brand from Unicron, because sometimes in that reality, Unicron uses the Decepticon symbol for some reason. However, that is why it is a fan theory and does not come from any official media. But hey, if it helps you to explain why she, for some reason, has a Decepticon emblem molded into her back, there you go. You can connect those dots. And you know what? I wouldn't blame you if you did. So number 8 on this list we've actually talked about on the main channel. But the main gist of it was Mark and Evan, whenever they were designing the first season group of Beast Wars characters, they thought that one day down the line when they do Transmetals, they thought that maybe they could kind of save some time and do partials. And so with that being the case, they cooked in a couple of Transmetal details. For instance, on the Inferno and the Antagony figures, inside of the chest, they actually have detailing that matches the Transmetal Scavenger. Another known case is that of Tarantulas and him having his gun saw weapon that he only got after he became a Transmetal. And while it doesn't look 100% like it, it's mainly meant to represent it. However, they were told that no, when you do transmetals, just build them from the ground up. So the reason it's on this list is because it is a hidden and unique feature of modern figures that is kind of a cool little thing of what might have been, but thankfully will not be. Number 9 depends on how in-depth your knowledge is of the Transformers. Going back to the, well, tail end of the American cartoon, you will know that both Fortress Maximus and Scorponok are not the best of friends. They are each other's arch enemy. Now, in all honesty, this is the 2001 re-release of, in the American cartoon, it was called Emissary, but in the original cartoon, it was Cerebros. So, when you detach Cerebros' Headmaster, it's either, again, the R.I.D. cartoon referred to this as Cerebros, but in the old 80s cartoon, it was Spike. Now, Scorponok's original Headmaster was named Lord Zarak. And as you can see here in this photograph, his original Headmaster differs from the design that we saw with Spike's Headmaster. Now, this is actually the same mold, same sculpt that was used for Spike in the 80s. This, again, is just the 2001 reproduction. And when we look at Scorponok, they just reused Spike's sculpt to basically create Scorponok's Headmaster. Okay, why did you use Spike's? You guys know that Zarak's Headmaster looked different than this, right? And in fiction, this is Olin Zarak, the son of the original Headmaster of Scorponok. So while I have no idea why they did that, again, it is a very unique feature. And number 10, we will get back to the Fortress Maximus situation, but we have to do it via this figure right here. Now, this is obviously not a 2001 R.I.D. figure, although he was released in that toy line, despite this being the Grand Mal Megatron from Beast Machines, and even having a Viacon spark crystal in his head. Now, there is kind of a ingenious way that they introduce why Megatron decided to have a giant head as an alternate mode. And if you saw the Beast Machines cartoon, this head was gigantic, which in fiction, that would come back to actually serve a purpose. Now, what makes this figure unique is the fact that in the fiction they gave for this Megabolt Megatron is that the reason he has a giant head is that he wants to take control of the Autobots' secret fortress, Fortress Maximus. And who is currently missing a head at this time? Well, again, it's our 2001 R.I.D. Fortress Maximus. Now, you can see this figure has spider legs. For us to do what I'm about to show you, you have to pop the legs out in order for it to work. Now, because this figure is, 20-something years old, I'm not going to be popping the legs off of this figure because, well, plastic gets brittle over time, and I did it once before, but I'm a little bit chicken now. So in all fairness, you see these pictures that were taken well over 10 years ago with a far less impressive camera, and that's why they're potato quality, okay? That's why they're not immaculate. But you can see that this Grand Mal Megatron with his giant fat head can indeed take over the body of Fortress Maximus. And I tell you what, it kind of looks cool with these colors. It's not 100% gelling, but it is unique to see a bad guy in control of Fortress Maximus's body. And so to finish this video off, guys, here you can see that the Megatron head, without detaching the legs, it can sit up there, and maybe if you wanted a little bit of an illusion like it was connected, you could drop the cannon down and kind of scoot him forward. But I mean, it still doesn't look bad. And like I said, I'm not going to pop the legs off of this thing ever again. I did 10 plus years ago, but now I'm like, I'm a little bit leery of doing that. So it is an option, I guess, if I ever wanted to have this thing right here being a menace on the shelf. I'm not gonna lie, whenever the legs start going really fast and the mouth starts moving, that is really kind of creepy, because this is Beast Megatron just as a crab head thingy, and it's, you know what, I love it because it's so horrifying, but yet it's so awesome. However, I hope you enjoyed all the bots that we looked at with their unique and interesting features. If you guys, again, knew any of these features, or if you maybe found out about a new one, go ahead and comment down below. And with that being said, guys,
Maximize!
Royalty commands your wreckage, destroyer of my colony!
Give my regards to the pit, Predacon.